Hello, I'm coming in to share another invitation with you for this week. Invitation or challenge, should you wish to accept it. Channeled as guidance for me and for you, from my soul to yours. So, this feels like a bit of a variation on a theme from the last few weeks, but it is also inviting us into a deeper level of intimacy and kind of perhaps challenging the edges around how much we're willing to soften back into ourselves. So part of me is like, really? Are we not gonna like get on with business now? Isn't it time to rev things up? But no. Well, yes and no, because of course we are also active in our lives. But there's this kind of through line of guidance inviting us into. I feel that it's kind of a strengthening of our inner foundations that is really kind of building blocks that we're putting in place inside of ourselves that will really, really serve us in the months and even the years to come. So it's really more than just for this week. And yeah, that it is kind of, it's not just like do this and everything will be grand. It's like this is one aspect that you can kind of tend to and take care of. And if you can allow this to happen a little bit more and more each day, then it's a foundation for everything else in our lives. All the things that we do that are in different kinds of energies and less in the intimate space and more in the external space and the relational space and our daily commitments and activities and work in the world. So, here are the words that came through for this day and this week. So, go gently. Be gentle with yourself in sweet harmony with who you be. This does not get in the way of life, it is the way. The new way forward for what your soul longs to create here in this life of yours, for you and yours. Gently, softly, in sweet harmony with who you truly be. With exquisite, tender care, like the most precious jewel. The softer you become, the more fear you release, the more power you retrieve. Soften yet more into yourself. Melt into softness within. Feel yourself and treat yourself as precious. You are an unspeakably precious and powerful being. Whatever is happening around you, remain soft inside yourself. Treat yourself softly. No one can take this away. So that's what came through. And it does feel like a sense of strengthening of that sovereignty. So no matter what kind of external things may be triggering you or activating you into coming out of balance, your capacity to actually be gentle with yourself in your own relationship with you is, I suppose, like a superpower or a kind of a potency and an agency that you retain inside of yourself. And what really struck me was this kind of acknowledgement of the fear that we have when it comes to softening and being gentle with ourselves, the kind of cringe that can bring up, or the just the general discomfort and fear. And that's for good reason, because often when we soften into ourselves, we come into contact with what's very uncomfortable, with feelings, with trauma, with sensations, with emotions, with truths that we don't necessarily want to be in contact with. So it's much easier to stay outside of ourselves. But we keep being invited to soften and deepen. But particularly with this, these particular words that came through, it was like to really acknowledge your preciousness no matter what else is going on, and that's something you can continue to do and continue to deepen into. Because I think we tend to sort of soften a little and be, a little bit kinder to ourselves, practice something that's like, ticks the self-care box, or we connect for a few minutes, but then we say, okay, that's enough, and we like fear losing those protections and the armoring around us, and that we might melt into a puddle if we actually soften fully. It's like this sense of like, I might be annihilated if I really allow myself to rest back into myself. And then what I was reminded of was this beautiful line from a John O'Donoghue poem, and many of you will know him as a kind of Celtic mystic, I guess. And the line that has always stayed with me is, be excessively gentle with yourself. And I remember just thinking that's such a strange but perfect turn of phrase, because it really acknowledges how we need to hear that as humans, that, you know, being gentle is like, okay, I get it intellectually, you know, I'll be okay, I'll maybe slow down a little bit when I put my jacket on, or like for a few moments, but not to kind of have that gentleness as a way of being, and to be excessively gentle with ourselves. And I'll share that poem maybe in the next day or two, but it kind of speaks of the initial bereftness and lostness that we can encounter when we do actually soften, perhaps for the first time in a long time, or maybe softening into a deeper layer, deeper into those kind of inner tissues and layers. And there can be a bit of a collapse. There can be a little bit of a feeling of collapse, and then we sort of feel the grief surfacing. But then it passes, and then we come into contact with this inner power that is so kind of profound and solid and immutable. Like, it really is true power. It's not this kind of cobbled together power of the will, the false will, like pushing yourself through your day's activities and your to-do lists. Because I think many of us who are engaged in these self-connection practices and in, you know, on a spiritual path or a path of healing and growth, we kind of come into these spaces like retreats, or even like a private session with a healer or a therapist or a mentor, or a body, you know, treatment, and then you kind of come back out into the real world and then flip into this harshness, or this sort of like, right, I have to pull myself together to function. And so the words sweet harmony feel like such an invitation into kind of a dynamic balance between, you know, there's some things that I want to do in the world and in my daily life, but I'm not gonna like pull so far back out of myself that I come out of harmony or out of integrity with my inner needs, or be harsh, you know. So it is possible to get things done and show up in your life without being harsh with yourself. It really is. And I'm saying that so that your mind can kind of anchor in that, but we really all need the evidence of that. So it's only when we start practicing living that way that we start to kind of realize, oh, this can be a way of living. It's not just after like a 10-day silent retreat or whatever it is that, you know, you might be doing. I'm just saying that as a kind of an extreme example, but something I have done in the past as well. But so yeah, I wanted to also kind of give an example. So like when people do work on their inner critic, very often the thing that comes up in my work with people, and in general, even actually I've had it in comments on Twitter when I used to be in Twitter, it's like, haha, well, if I didn't listen to my inner critic, I would never get anything done. Or like, you know, what are you suggesting, that we all just collapse into sort of, you know, being lazy, good for nothings and just do nothing? So the assumption that when you're not driving yourself forward with your inner critic, you must then be, you know, just sort of turn into a pool of water who doesn't get anything done, is interesting. And like, what's in the middle of that? What's in between? And what's in between is true power, not false will, from this kind of defensive or wounded place of I have to keep going, and then collapsing into bed, you know. It's like, or continuing to keep up pretenses and false things in your life that are actually misaligned, and kind of bracing your way through. And I'm speaking about this, you know, it's not necessarily that dramatic and can be happening at quite a subtle level, but it's for each of you to see where that's, you know, to kind of stay curious about where that might be at play in your life. So when we remove the false will and the kind of inner critic as the driver and the motivator, we actually access a kind of a true like soul power and a beingness and a presence that actually does kind of make you want to come forth and express and do things in your life. Like, that's the place I'm doing this from right now. I felt like sharing this with you, you know. I set this intention and I waited for the time when it was like, okay, now's the time, because my life is arranged for me to be able to do that now. There are some things that I do have to show up for at particular times, like client work and other appointments. So, you know, I don't want to go into too many details about it, but I feel this need to preempt, I think, the mind's critiques or skepticism when I share these words about being gentle and softening, because there's such a fear of it. There really is such a fear of it. And so there's a difference, you know, when your actions and your words and your way of relating to people is coming from your kind of this more essential like beingness, this presence of like being rooted inside your body and your being, and like is more aligned with your true desires and your commitments that feel like in integrity with you, it's a whole different quality. It really is. It's a whole different thing that happens. But your life might still look the same, like you still show up for the same things, but the depth of presence and the satisfaction and the that feeling of being in integrity with yourself is so different. So that's what I wanted to share with you. It feels also like a real time of kind of fresh beginnings and rebirth. I just had a string of synchronicities today of kind of, you know, numbers and signs and symbols, all to do with this sort of like 000 clean slate rebirth in my own life cycle, and also with the moon, you know, kind of burgeoning and releasing, and just kind of in general and the season that's in it. It does feel like there's some rebirthing energies abounding, and we're in constant rebirths inside of ourselves, of course. But yeah, I share these words with you in support of that rebirth. And if you want to come and practice being in presence and kind of softening into yourself in a place and space that is kind of held and feels safe for you to melt a little bit more while still feeling held, and like you won't fragment perhaps, because that's a very real fear that we have. You're very welcome to join me in circle on Zoom from the comfort of your own home next Monday evening for a women's circle on womb wisdom and this kind of rooting and anchoring and resourcing from within, and really retrieving that connection with your authentic desires and your inner wisdom and that power inside. Yeah, that's it. Actually, no, that's not it. There was one more thing I wanted to share. I'm having this hilarious experience at the moment of lyrics coming through to blend in with my journaling, with my realizations, my big ahas. Like when there's a lot of kind of inner work coming to fruition, I often have interesting experiences of like synchronicities and just kind of a bit of a comedy show with the universe. And so I had a beautiful experience of, do you remember that song from I think it's the early 90s? I actually looked it up. My friend looked it up for me because I shared it with her, and it was by The Beloved, Sweet Harmony. So, you know, it came through today as well. And you know, the one that goes, let's come together right now, oh yeah, in sweet harmony. And then when I checked out the lyrics, I was like, oh my god, this is actually quite profound words for what I thought was like a generic 90s tune. So you can look it up if you want, and I might share it actually. But it's really a sense of like kind of softening, like bringing all parts of ourselves together. I mean, I think it's to do with the collective and each other as well, more perhaps in this song, but who knows, because art is to be interpreted by the listener and the viewer. But it's a sense of unity, you know, coming into harmony and unity and making a change. So that change really does happen within as much as it does without, and perhaps sometimes it has to happen within before it can happen without. So when you're able to soften into yourself and be with yourself in gentleness and treat yourself like a precious being, and stay present with what surfaces, you know, even if that is shame or self-loathing or fear or anxiety, fretting, whatever it is, when you can actually hold all that in unity, that's when you become whole. That's when you come home to yourself and become whole. And that's what we need, more people who are integrated and not afraid of their different parts and their different aspects, so that we can then relate to each other more from our wholeness and not from fragmented places of blame and shame and acting out and all the disharmony that we see. So this doesn't, you know, sometimes I feel like what I share here feels like a little bit removed from real life, but I also remind myself that it makes such a huge difference to how we show up in the 3D world of reality and engagement with each other. And this inner self-respect and integrity is truly priceless and ripples out so far afield in your family, in your personal relationships, romantic relationships, work relationships, in your family, and how you treat other beings, you know, plants, everything. So yeah, it's profound. Just being gentle with yourself can have absolutely epic ramifications. Okay, have a good week, and I will speak to you soon.